In 2008, on Galveston Island, Texas, Ron Wooten found the animal that had just killed his dog. He'd worked in fisheries biology. He knew what a coyote looked like. This was close, but the head was too heavy, the legs too long. Nobody could tell him what it was. 10 years later, a Princeton genetics lab ran the DNA and found the genes of a wolf the government declared extinct in the wild by 1980. Galveston is the first of 7 cases on this continent, and no 2 agencies agree what to do about any of it. Meanwhile, most of a country away in the Blackwater swamps of northeastern North Carolina, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is trapping coyotes, sterilizing them in the field, and releasing them back into the same territory, specifically to stop what happened on Galveston Island from happening there. It's the same 2 species in the same years, under the same federal agency, and the 2 programs are pointed in different directions. Say hybrid animal and people picture a zoo. A mule, a liger, the sterile one-off that exists because 2 species ended up in the same enclosure and nothing else was on offer. That picture is also the assumption underneath American wildlife law, and right now it's failing in 7 places at once. Number 1. The ghost wolves of Galveston Island. The red wolf was a real animal with a real range, and it covered the Gulf Coast from Texas into Louisiana until the government gave up on it. By 1980, the species was declared extinct in the wild, a finding published by Fredrickson and Hedrick in Conservation Biology and still cited in the genetics literature today. Everything left alive was in captivity, in a breeding program, on a clipboard. That was the official record for almost 40 years. Wooten kept photographing the island coyotes and kept emailing researchers about them, and most of a decade went by before anyone with a sequencer took him seriously. Then, in 2018, a study came back in the journal Genes. 2 animals killed on Galveston roads had been tested. Their DNA showed heavy assignment to red wolf ancestry, and they carried alleles found in red wolves and almost nowhere else on Earth. Nobody had released these animals, and nobody had lost them out of a pen. They'd been on the barrier island the entire time, unexamined, because everybody who saw one assumed they already knew what a coyote was. It was the first evidence anywhere that red wolf DNA had survived undetected in a wild canid population on the Gulf Coast, 40 years after the species was written off there. The follow-up went much bigger. Through February 2021, a team walked the island collecting scat and tissue for DNA, 203 samples on Galveston alone, 168 of them along 25 walking routes mapped across the dunes and scrub, plus another 261 samples off the southeast Texas mainland. The results ran in BMC Ecology and Evolution in 2022. 24 individual island coyotes carried more than 10% red wolf ancestry. 10 of them carried more than a quarter. On the mainland, the average was 21%, and 2 individual animals came back above 50. The team identified at least 4 distinct family groups on the island. 4 groups breeding among themselves on a barrier island with a state highway running down the length of it. And this is the part that decides everything downstream. Legally, those animals are coyotes. Coyotes carry no protection at all. The red wolves in North Carolina, descended from the captive program, carry the full weight of the Endangered Species Act. The Galveston animals holding wild red wolf genes that survived when the official ones didn't get nothing. Between 2020 and 2025, 75 of them were struck and killed by cars on the island. The Gulf Coast Canine Project took that mortality figure to the Texas Department of Transportation. A public meeting followed on the island in January 2025, and by March 2026, the state had installed wildlife crossing signs at 10 locations along a 19-mile stretch of coastal highway on the island. 10 yellow warning signs along the road. That's the protection. Meanwhile, a $2.1 million grant is funding the relocation of some island coyotes to a research facility in St. Louis, where geneticists Bridget Von Holt and Kristen Brzeski want to use that DNA to rebuild the red wolf. They came to Galveston and held a town hall about it in 2024 in a community that had spent years being told those were just ugly coyotes. So, on the Texas coast, red wolf genes riding inside a coyote are worth $2.1 million in research funding. The animal carrying them still has no legal status of any kind. Number 2, the placeholder program. The Fish and Wildlife Service began releasing captive-bred red wolves into eastern North Carolina in 1987 under an experimental non-essential designation that gave managers room to move. The wolves were shot and hit by cars, and all the usual things happened. But by 1999, the agency had identified something worse in its own recovery documents. The wolves weren't being killed out of existence. They were being bred out of it. Coyotes had filled the recovery area. Red wolves were pairing with them because there weren't enough red wolves left to pair with, and every mixed litter meant less red wolf in the generation after. The answer became the centerpiece of the agency's Red Wolf Adaptive Management Plan, and it's stranger than anything a poacher ever did to that population. It's called placeholder theory. Field crews trap a coyote in the recovery area. Males get a vasectomy, females get a tubal ligation. The hormones stay intact on purpose because the entire point is that the animal keeps behaving exactly like a coyote afterward. Then it goes back into the precise territory it came from, where it patrols that ground, drives off other coyotes, holds the space, and produces nothing. A living fence made out of a sterilized animal stretched across roughly 6,000 square kilometers of northeastern North Carolina. The logic is the part worth understanding. Kill that coyote instead, and you've opened a vacancy on good ground, and the next fertile coyote in the county moves in and fills it within a season. That's why the sterilized animal goes back to the exact spot it was trapped. It holds that ground for the rest of its life, and nothing gets born on it. In the 2021 to 2022 trapping season alone, staff captured 20 canids, and 12 of those coyotes were sterilized, collared, and put back where they were found. A 2022 paper by Hinton and colleagues in the journal Ecosphere found that coyotes living under this federal regime show lower abundance, lower density, and lower survival than coyote populations anywhere outside it. The program works. Put the two states side by side. In Texas, $2.1 million in grant money is going toward saving red wolf genes that live inside coyotes. In North Carolina, whole trapping seasons and a surgical program go toward keeping red wolf genes out of coyotes. Same country, same agency, same two species standing in the room. The biology is identical. The difference is paperwork. One of those populations was written into a federal recovery plan in 1987, and the other has never been written into anything. Hold on to that, because the same three conditions that built Galveston are running underneath almost everything left in this video. Number 3. The cats along the Minnesota snow line. In August 2003, the U.S. Forest Service Genetics Laboratory in Missoula, Montana, confirmed the first wild crosses between Canada lynx and bobcat ever documented. The animals came out of the Moosehead region of Maine. Two cats that only overlap along one narrow band of the continent, the line where deep snow country starts. The Forest Service record documents 7 hybrid animals in total, 5 female and 2 male, pulled from Maine, Minnesota, and New Brunswick between 1986 and 2003. Mitochondrial DNA gave researchers the direction of every single pairing because mitochondria come from the mother. All 7 had Canada lynx mothers. Not one had a bobcat mother, which means the crossing runs one way, and the rarer of the 2 cats is the one absorbing it. these aren't sterile curiosities either. In the conservation genetics paper on those animals, one female hybrid was tracked with 3 kittens of her own, and a second carried the internal signs of an earlier litter, the physical record of a completed pregnancy. Whatever this is, it's carrying forward into a second generation of its own. Minnesota logged its first verified case from samples taken in November and December of 2002. Hybrids have since turned up in Cook, Itasca, Lake, and Pine counties in Minnesota and across the line in Polk County, Wisconsin. If you live up there, those are your counties, and this is happening on ground you drive through. And the contact zone isn't closing. The State Department of Natural Resources counted 43 lynx in the core area in 2016, 109 by 2020, and 136 by 2023, with a rough statewide estimate near 200. Those core area figures come out of the Superior National Forest, which is also where the Forest Service tracks them. More lynx pushing into more bobcat country every winter along the same line. Number 4, the bear that shouldn't exist. In 2006, a hunter near Sachs Harbor on Banks Island in the Northwest Territories shot a bear that looked wrong. White coat, brown patches around the eyes and running down the back, a humped shoulder that no polar bear has. DNA testing came back as the first confirmed wild cross between a polar bear and a grizzly ever documented. Between 2012 and 2014, 6 more turned up, killed by hunters or live captured by biologists working the Western Arctic. Genetic analysis reconstructed the family tree, and that's the detail most coverage skips. 8 confirmed hybrids in the research record. 4 are first generation, an even split of polar and grizzly. The other 4 are second generation backcrosses, 3/4 grizzly, and all 8 of them trace back to a single female polar bear across 8 years of sampling. The backcrosses are the part that should stop you. A second generation animal that's 3/4 grizzly means the first generation crosses weren't a dead end. They grew up, found grizzlies, and bred successfully. Those 4 backcrosses are the reason biologists could draw a family tree out there at all. One of those second-generation animals ended up as a mounted specimen on public display in the small northern community of Ulukaktok in the Northwest Territories, where travelers pass it on the way through. Now the honest objection, and it's the right one to raise: 8 animals is nothing. Polar Bears International has examined more than 800 genetic samples from wild bears and found those same 8 and no others. In absolute terms, hybridization up there is rare, and anyone telling you the Arctic is filling with pizzly bears is selling something. What the record actually supports is narrower and more uncomfortable than that. Sea ice loss is keeping polar bears on land longer, grizzly range is pushing north, and 2 ranges that used to barely touch now overlap. The opportunity is increasing. The confirmed count is 8, and 8 is the number this video is going to use. If you've seen something in your own county that didn't match the field guide, put it in the comments, the state and the animal. I read all of them, and they're where half these episodes start. Number 5. The wolf that Congress had to define. In 2016, a whole genome study led by Von Holt in Science Advances put hard numbers on something that had unsettled wolf biologists for decades. The Great Lakes wolf carries roughly 25% coyote ancestry. The Algonquin wolf of eastern Canada carries roughly 40%. Both are currently protected and managed as native wolf populations. A separate Y chromosome study by Wilson and colleagues in 2012 found signatures of 3 species mixing across eastern North America: wolf, coyote, and in places domestic dog, which raises a question the Endangered Species Act was never designed to answer. If a protected wolf is 40% coyote, what exactly is on the protected list? That question landed hardest on the red wolf, because if the red wolf is an old wolf-coyote hybrid rather than a species, The entire North Carolina recovery program loses its legal footing, along with the sterilization crews and the 6,000 square kilometers. So in March 2018, Congress wrote it into an appropriations bill and directed the Fish and Wildlife Service to obtain an independent scientific review of red wolf taxonomy. The National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine took the assignment and reported in March 2019. The finding was that there was sufficient evidence to support species status for the red wolf, while acknowledging that coyote ancestry most likely entered the line somewhere between the 1920s and the 1940s. Committee Chair Joseph Travis put it to WUNC in plain language. Red wolves share genes with gray wolves and coyotes, but red wolves also carry genes found in neither one. Then, in October 2020, the academies published a follow-up laying out a research strategy for continuing to examine red wolf taxonomy, which tells you the question was settled well enough to keep the protections in place and not well enough to close the file. And it doesn't always break that way, which matters. The same suspicion was pointed at the Mexican gray wolf, reintroduced into Arizona and New Mexico since 1998, and now past 250 animals in the wild census. A genome-wide study out of the University of Arizona in 2018 tested it for domestic dog ancestry and found none. The tiny shared signal, 0.06%, came back as ancient common ancestry rather than recent breeding. Clean result, which is worth knowing because it means the messy answers everywhere else aren't coming from the way the question gets asked. That gradient runs south too, which is the thread we followed on this channel with the eastern coyote. In the Northeast, those animals run roughly 60 to 84% coyote, 8 to 25% wolf, and 8 to 11% dog. In Virginia, the wolf share drops to about 2%. Down in the deep south, it's 4% wolf and 5% dog. The further you get from the original Great Lakes contact zone, the thinner the wolf gets. You can measure the front of it by state. That's the same pressure that built Galveston, working on a different animal. Number 6, the deer. Everything to this point has been predators, which makes it easy to file all of it as a carnivore problem, something happening to wolves and cats and bears, and not to anything you hunt. A 2022 population genomics study of free-ranging white-tailed deer and mule deer across the Great Plains, peer-reviewed and listed in the U.S. Geological Survey publication record, found a long history of gene flow between the two species. The paper describes that gene flow running back well before anyone was sampling for it, so this isn't recent contamination. The hybrids appear to be reproductive, and the authors are openly uncertain what that means for the genetic integrity of either species over the long run. That work is still going right now. In December 2025, researchers at South Dakota State University began the first study dedicated specifically to mule and white-tailed deer hybridization in South Dakota, taking DNA from small tissue samples and expecting to confirm a small percentage of hybrids in the sampled herd. The same release carries a number worth stopping on. In their study area, fawn survival to 4 months for both species sat at 24%. 3 out of 4 fawns don't make it to autumn. That's the pressure those herds are already under before a single question about genetics enters the room. 2 of the most hunted animals in America are blending on the Great Plains, and the first study aimed straight at it. In that state started in December of last year. This is not a carnivore problem. Number 7, the wolf dogs, and the one we caused on purpose. The other 6 cases happened because ranges moved and mate pools shrank. This one happens because people breed it deliberately in backyards for money. In July 2022, near Troy, Montana, a man shot animals that had come into his fenced barn area and attacked his goats. He reported it to Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks as state law requires, and the department's assessment was that they were most likely wolf-dog hybrids rather than wolves. 2 years before that, in 2020, the Michigan Department of Natural Resources executed a search warrant at an animal sanctuary in Muskegon County, following complaints that wolf dogs there had injured volunteers and a child. Officers removed 6 red foxes, 3 coyotes, 4 eastern box turtles, and 2 fawns the facility had no permit to hold, and reported 47 illegal wolf dogs on the property. In Michigan, crossbreeding a wolf and a dog without a state permit is against the law. The case went to Muskegon County Circuit Court on both civil and criminal tracks, and it took a warrant to establish how many animals were behind that fence in the first place. There's also a case that cuts the other way, and it belongs in here if you want to trust anything else in this video. On May 16, 2018, near Denton, Montana, a rancher shot an animal that went national as a mysterious wolf-dog hybrid. Long claws, strange proportions, an internet full of theories about what it was. The Fish and Wildlife Service Forensic Laboratory ran the DNA against thousands of reference samples from wolves, coyotes, and dogs. It was a purebred female gray wolf from the northern Rocky Mountains, 2 or 3 years old. A wolf. Most of these stories end right there with an ordinary animal and a bad photograph. The 7 in this video didn't, and that's the reason to take them seriously. Because none of them are separate stories. Red wolves and coyotes on a Texas barrier island, lynx and bobcats along one snow line in Minnesota, polar bears and grizzlies in the western Canadian Arctic, mule deer and whitetails on the Great Plains. Every one of those pairings needs the same 3 conditions, and this continent is supplying all 3 at once. Habitat cut into smaller and smaller pieces, so populations that used to be enormous are now small and walled off from each other. Mate pools shrinking inside those pieces, so a rare animal that can't find its own kind settles for the common one standing next to it, and ranges sliding under a warming climate, pushing species into contact that spent the last 10,000 years apart. Rarity plus proximity over and over on a continent that keeps supplying both, which leaves the law standing on a floor that's moving underneath it. The Endangered Species Act protects species, and a species is supposed to be a clean line you can draw. Congress spent 2018 and 2019 and 2020 trying to decide whether one American animal qualified for one. And while that was happening, out on Galveston Island, 4 family groups of legally unprotected coyotes went on carrying the genes of the exact animal the whole fight was about, and what they got for it was 10 road signs on Farm to Market 3005. Wooten stood over a dead animal in his yard in 2008 and knew the shape was wrong. It took 10 years and a genetics lab to prove him right, and the thing he'd found had never gone extinct at all. It changed shape, moved out to the edge of the island, and kept living there while the paperwork said otherwise.